The world of Farloom is a world full of diverse and wonderful creatures, all with unique movesets and interesting powers. Entering a new area to find out what new enemies await is a large part of what I love about this world. The world of Pokemon is a world full of diverse and wonderful creatures, all with unique movesets and interesting powers. Entering a new area to find what new enemies await is a large part of what I love about this world. So, what if, and hear me out on this, I combine the two? After all, a decent amount of my current audience is fans of both Silksong and Pokemon, considering my Hollow Knight and Silksong videos did fairly well, by my standards at least. On top of that, making Fakemon is like 95% of this channel, and the Silksong brainworms still have not released me from their clutches. To be more specific, I'm going to be turning the 4 old hearts, Nioith, Carmelita, Con, and the Green Bean into Pokemon. Not only that, but all 4 of these characters have a category of enemies that they kind of seem to rule over, or at least have some kind of connection to. Nihilith has the flower enemies in Shellwood, Carmelita have the Scar, Con has the enemies in the Coral Tower, and the Green Prince has the citizens of Verdonian. So on top of making each of these bosses as Pokemon, I'm also going to be making them each a pre-evolution to represent their citizens. This is going to be a pretty long video, so I'd appreciate it if you sticked around until the end. Now let's... Oh. Right. Yeah, turns out someone else, Deviza Illustrations, I hope I said your name right, already has made a video with this exact concept. However, I was already too deep into this video to give up, so I continued anyways, making this extra shirt to make sure mine don't look too similar to his. And besides, he's making an entire region based on Silksong. I'm just doing this one video. Probably. I can have this. But all jokes aside, he is a very talented artist, and if you like Pokemon and Silksong, which of course you do, you're watching this video, I would 100% recommend watching his series. It's very cool. Now, going in order that I made them, let's start with Carmelita and the Scar. To be more specific, I'm turning the Scar Scout into a Pokemon, because it seems to be the most default one of the bunch. I knew I wanted them to be fighting type, as I saw that as a kind of primal or tribal type, especially since the decent amount of past Paradox Pokemon are like Slitherwing, Great Tusk, and Koraidon are fighting type, and the Scar seem like a pretty fierce group with their bone weapons and large emphasis on training to be warriors. And seeing that they're one of the few enemies in Silksong that are based on a specific type of bug, likely some sort of ant or termite, I felt like giving them the bug type fit pretty well. A bunch of the Scar also have these grayish-green tufts of fur around their necks, which I decided to make much larger, almost entirely obscuring their face to the point where the only part showing is just the tops of their eyes and their foreheads. Not only does this work in a character or creature design perspective, giving them natural camouflage for hunting, but also references the trope of assassins wearing these face masks. The rest of their body is fairly simple, just bulking up certain parts of their body because the art style of Silksong and Hollow Knight leads to quite a few spindly character designs. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it just needed to be bulked up a bit to make sense in the context of Pokemon. I like these oversized forearms mostly because they gave it a real sense of power as well as emphasizing just how top-heavy they are. Finally, I gave them one large claw on each arm to look like the weapons that they use in-game. When traveling through the far fields in Hunter's March, beware of Formidant, from the scientific name for ants, Formicidae, the common name for ant, and Formidable, a bug fighting type with the abilities Defiant, Unburden, and Compound Eyes. These Pokemon are incredibly territorial and will attack anything that enters their nests. They are trained to prime form from birth and both hunt prey and defend their home. They are incredibly adept at using their sickle-like claws. These claws can detach and be launched like a projectile and grow back in a week. However, this leaves them defenseless until they grow back. Now for Carmelita, I really didn't want to make her just another humanoid Pokemon, but I couldn't think of anything else, so just know that I'm sorry. I kept the neck shrubbery to make sure it has a unique silhouette and head shape, even though Carmelita herself doesn't have any of that on her. I was unsure if I wanted her to have this Hawaiian dancer thing going on, having some sort of tufts of fur on her ankles and wrists, but eventually decided against it. I did give her a skirt of the same stuff though, to keep the design balanced. I made her antennae look more rigid and resemble a stereotypical Valkyrie wing decor on their helmets. At one point I thought about making her a grass type because I thought her dress in-game reminded me of a rose, but I knew she was going to be a fighting type, that was non-negotiable, and bug just made more sense, so I went against that. However, I did change one claw on Formidant to 2 claws that resemble the curved claw item in-game. I wanted to make sure to balance the grace of the original design with fury and wildness. And one of the last things I wanted to make sure was that I kept her iconic pose she strikes during her boss fight and in her statue. So, when your female Formidant reaches level 38, you get Carmelita from Formicidae, Formidable, and Carmelita, a bug fighting type with the abilities Defiant, Unburden, and the new ability Osteoprowess, which gives it a 40% power to bone-themed attacks, including moves like Bone Club, Bone Meringue, and more abstract ones like Ancient Power, and the new move Bone Claw, a 60 base power physical rock move with a 15% chance to flinch, and can use either the target's defense or special defense stat, whichever would deal more damage. Yes, the move list that this ability would affect is really specific, but hopefully a 40% boost is enough to make it worth it. These Pokemon attack with grace as if dancing. They use the bones of their prey as weapons and sharpen them on stones within their nests for enhanced lethality. They are benevolent leaders of massive nests of Formidant. They care deeply for those they watch over, but will swiftly execute anyone who dares to harm the nest. Next is Con and the Caraca. The Coral Tower where he can be found is one of my favorite parts of Silksong, and Con himself has mad aura, even if the boss fight itself was underwhelming. Unlike the Scar, I had a perfect idea of what animal to base him off of. Crabs! His whole thing is coral, which is a spiky, hard underwater thing, just like crabs. As for the pre-evolution, I based it off of the Caraca. I decided to make it a hermit crab and make it look like it's wearing armor that's just way too big for its teeny tiny body, and claws that are gonna look like the swords that they use in the fight. One problem was that I knew I wanted it to be a water rock type, and rock was easy enough to show, but the water part was much harder to do. The Caraca's color scheme is exclusively black and red, and the water types is blue, which is like the complete opposite of black and red. I very briefly tried adding some blue into it, but it looked super weird and decided against it. And I'm not that terribly upset. After all, Pokemon like Octillery, Psyduck, and Krabby are all water types without an ounce of blue on them, so I could probably get away with it. It was a bit rough trying to make it look like a silly first stage when the Caraca are supposed to be battle-hardened warriors, but I eventually managed to make it work with these huge rectangular eyes. So, welcome Caracrab from Caraca and Crab, a water type with the abilities Shell Armor, Bulletproof, and Oblivious. These Pokemon wish to be large and powerful, but as of now is small and weak. They cover themselves in the discarded shells of other Pokemon to protect themselves. Tiny and unimpressive, these Pokemon can hardly move their limbs. Their claws are long and sharp, but move too slowly to do any real damage to prey or predators. Now for Con himself. While the Caraca was a hermit crab, Con is going to be a king crab, both to fit his title, Crust King, but the king crab is also rather spikely, just like Con and his coral. Now while Caracrab is weak and pathetic, this Con Pokemon is going to be large and imposing. Another thing I forgot to mention is that its rock type, well, yes, does go back to Rocky Coral, is also partially inspired by the Watcher at the Edge, who, while I'm not going to make a design off of it, at least now, would absolutely be rock ground or rock fighting type. Who knows, maybe one of these days I'll make one of those strange variant Pokemon of this Con Pokemon, like Eternal Flower Floet or Blood Moon Ursaluna based on the Watcher at the Edge. Anyways, the design is pretty bare bones and uninspired, if I'm gonna be honest. It's not the worst design in the video, but I think it's the one with the worst inspiration. The colors are pretty cool though. So if you happen to have 6 Caracrab in your party, the highest level one will be compatible with a Water Stone. If you give this Caracrab a Water Stone, you will be rewarded with Caracon from Caraca and Con, a water rock type with the abilities Battle Armor, Bulletproof, and Intimidate. This particular Pokemon has risen above its peers and grown big and strong. They rule over colonies of Caracrab with an iron fist, helping them too become strong. The discarded shells it once wore have fused to their body. These shells are as tough as boulders. They command sharp coral with their claws, strong enough to rip the seafloor in two. The next boss I'm going to be turning into a Pokemon is Nioith in the Fascia? Fakia? Fascia? Sure, Fascia. The Shellwood has a bunch of flower enemies that I could potentially turn into Pokemon, but I felt like the Fascia was the most default, if that makes sense, as well as looking the most like Nioith herself. For this one, I was heavily inspired by Floette and almost made this a regional variant, but decided not to. I like the idea of being inside a little flower bud that, when it evolves, it blooms into a much larger flower. A lot of the lore for this line mostly comes from the evolution, which I'll get to in a minute, but for now it's just a tiny little flower sprite. I also took some pretty heavy inspiration from dryads or nymphs, Greek nature spirits. Dryads are usually associated with trees, but I suppose this one can take the form of a flower. I also like the idea of making the body of the flower's pistil, or those long bits that you see in the center of a flower. Finally, it also gave these petals that cover most of its eyes, kind of giving it a creepy appearance that will only be enhanced further in the evolution. But for now, here is Pistilin, from Pistil and Pollen, a grass type with the abilities Flower Veil and Chlorophyll. These Pokemon thrive in thick forests. They peacefully drift around, spreading itchy pollen if attacked. Mischievous Pokemon, they love to spray hikers traveling below with the dense pollen. This pollen itches for days, and if left untreated, can lead to permanent allergies. Its shiny is pretty interesting, being inspired by Sister Splinter and her underlings, another boss that makes its home in Shellwood. As for Nioith herself, I'm not kidding when I say that this one caused me so much more trouble than any of the others combined. I didn't know if I wanted it to be slender or bulky, have legs, or simply float, but the biggest issue was just getting the shape of the flower down. If you look at Nihilith's in-game sprite, you would know what I'm talking about. Its shape is just so unlike anything I've ever drawn before, but eventually I ended up making something that I'm kind of happy with. It's not my best work, but it could definitely be worse. As for the inspiration, I turned it into a pretty neutral forest spirit in a dryad and turned it into a fae. While it may not look like it, in many stories, witches are in some way associated with fairies of folklore. And by fairies, I don't mean the Barbie, glitter, and magic kind you see all over modern media, although the magic part is definitely true. No, I'm talking about the fairies of European, specifically Scottish myth, the kind that will cause you to get lost in the forest for years just for the heck of it, only letting you go when they get bored. And the design doesn't really align with Nihilith's lore. That was too interesting not to do. And besides, Nihilith's lore says that the Citadel made a deal with her to allow pilgrims safe passage to her land. What's more fae than that? Also, I really like how I drew the limbs and body, with the bulbous joints make it look almost rickety, like it's gonna fall apart if it's hit by a slight wind. So if you enter the Forest Shrine and your Pistilin is at least level 35, it will evolve into Pistolith, from Pistil and Nihilith, a grass fairy type with the abilities Flower Veil, Chlorophyll, and Solar Power. Just a bunch of stereotypical grass abilities. These Pokemon enjoy solitude, living deep within thick forests. There are many myths surrounding these Pokemon, the most notable being that they create the forest that they reside in. It is said that when it shakes the stamen of its flower, it's casting a spell. Its motives are difficult to understand. If you find yourself in a Pistolith's territory, you may find yourself with arms full of beautiful flowers and a clear path out, or wandering through the forest for weeks or months, all depending on whether it likes you or not. The final line for this video is going to be the Green Prince and the Verdonian bugs. Even though it's very obviously inspired by a real bug, for a while I kept trying to make this some kind of plant creature. After all, Verdonia is very lush and green, possibly the most lush and green area in the entire game, as well as the Green Prince's boss fight being called Clover Dancers. And while I managed to do it fairly well for the first stage, looking like this kind of pitcher plant works well with the shape of the enemy's head and neck, for the Green Prince, I just couldn't. So he's just much more insect-like, but you'll have to just wait for that. It has this kind of thorny vine which will turn into something rather neat in the evolution. There really isn't much else to say about this one, so here is Cloverdon, a bug and grass type from Clover and Verdant, and by extension, Verdonia. It has the abilities Technician, Superlook, and Hypercutter. A fierce and loyal Pokemon, Cloverdon are often seen in pairs. They live exclusively in deep, lush caves, feeding off the flora that grows on the cave's walls. Their sharp arms can slice opponents 20 times per second. These Pokemon mate for life. If one perishes, the other will continue on its life, but it will never be the same. Their exoskeleton is exceptionally hard to crack. And finally, the Green Prince himself. For a while I tried making it some kind of plant thing like I mentioned before, But it just was not working here. Instead, I tried making it an actual bug, wondering if I should give it more grasshopper or mantis-like features, since I could imagine the Green Prince being either. Yes, we are just going to ignore the fact that we already know what mantises look like in the Hollow Knight verse. It looks a little uncanny with the more human top half and insectoid bottom half, but this is pretty much what mantises look like, so I suppose it's fine. Ever since I had the idea for this video, I was sure the Green Prince was going to be a ghost type. That was non-negotiable. And the bug type actually felt like more of an afterthought. I juggled with a few ideas on how to do the Ghost Prince, but I eventually decided to give it a ghostly spirit energy, enveloping parts of his body as well as its arms. On top of all that, the thorny vine that was on Cloverdan eventually turned into this somewhat halo-looking thing which resembled the barbed bit on the top of Cogwork Dancer's head. Oh yeah, and you know how I mentioned how Cloverdan get kinda depressed when their partner dies? Well, this is what happens to the living one. If your Cloverdan reaches level 40 with another fainted Cloverdan in your party, it will evolve into Verdonalts, a bug and ghost type from Verdant and Waltz. It has the abilities Technician, Hypercutter, and the new ability Ghostly Reach. With the ability Ghostly Reach, whenever Verdonalts makes an attack, the user will immediately use a second attack with 20% base power as the original move. Kind of like a less powerful parental bond. However, the second attack will always be Ghost type, meaning that it has all the type matchups as the Ghost type does. On top of that, if the original move was Ghost type, the second attack's power will be boosted to 30% instead of 20%. After this Pokemon's mate passes, its emotions become duller to the point where it seems emotionless. A piece of the mate's spirit accompanies it, assisting it in battle and keeping Verdonalt's company. It has lost its connection to nature and now wanders without purpose. Its ghostly arms can cleave body from soul. And that's the Old Heart Says Pokemon. Hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making it. Like I said at the beginning of the video, you should go check out Devaza illustrations. Again, I'm really sorry if I said that wrong, if you want to see more Silksong Pokemon. But if you want more from me, I have a video where I turn Silksong characters into Pokemon, which I made before the game came out, and another much older video where I turned Hollow Knight characters into Pokemon. And I guess the only thing left to do is say, come by the Discord server, follow me on Instagram, both of which are in the description. We have fun there. And with that, see ya, and stay safe.